Hello and welcome to Model Kit Stuff, and welcome to part 9 of our Endeavour build from Amati, and we're looking at figure 8 today. So in this video we'll be doing the whole of this step, so let's have a look at what it says in the instructions. So figure 8, assemble the deck house following the order indicated in the figure. So that's these numbers here. It doesn't really show you an order, it's just really the images, so we'll work through that. Checking the exact position of the pieces. Prepare the pieces in transparent acetate that simulate the glass, following the dimensions specified in the drawing below in 1:1 scale. So below the instructions we've got a 1:1 scale drawing of all the parts, including 2 little squares of acetate. So we'll come back to that in a minute. There's also a little note here. It says, we recommend to clean again and sand the pieces during assembly to make the painting easier. Well, we'll talk about that as well. So we're making the deck house. So let's have a look at that. So if we look at our pieces, they're still in our wood fret, our frame that the false deck was in, and we've got a number of wooden pieces here that are going to be used for different structures. And when you look at them, the thing to notice is these are made of plywood, and the edges of plywood have laminations, and when you construct these, anything that's end on, you will see those laminations. So there's a couple of options here. You could just build it as it is in the natural wood and give it a varnish, but you will see the laminations. You could stain them using a wood stain and change the colour. So in this case, this is a mahogany, so we'd take it to a mahogany look. But again, you will see the laminations of the plywood because what a stain does is it sinks into the wood and it changes its colour. You're not covering anything. Whilst a wood stain is a great product for a nice natural look and will look spectacular under a varnish, it's great. It's really great when you're using it on wood that's not laminated, that's not plywood. So you want a solid wood for that, in my opinion. Some people perhaps won't be so fussed about the laminations, but I am. Or you can paint it, and this is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to actually go with a walnut brown. It will look nice when we varnish it up. And this is an acrylic paint. It's part of the Admiralty paints range, and it's a great paint for working on woods. So it's my favourite brand of paint for wooden modelling, although you can also use enamel paints such as Humbrol enamels or colour coat enamels. So we need to be mindful at this stage as to what our process is going to be. And the first thing I want to say is, as you look at this, you can see there is some laser burning on here. And the first thing we want to do is actually lift that off and get rid of that a little bit. So I'm using a 320 grit here, and we want to just sand that away. And it's going to do two things, this sanding. It's going to remove the laser burn. So if you're varnishing this wood as natural, that is really, really helpful. But it's also going to smooth the surface, so it's going to reduce the feel of grain. Now that's really important, because when you put a wood stain on or a paint, it will open up the grain a little bit because it's got moisture in it, and that moisture expands the grain. So we want to close that down as much as we can to start with. So we want to sand it, and we want to do it now before we take the parts out, because if you sand the individual parts, firstly, these are small parts, so it will be much more difficult to do, but also you're much more likely to round off the edges, whereas if we leave it in here. We're sanding the full surface of everything, and it keeps everything nice and smooth and flat. So as we're going to be doing these parts, we might as well do all of these parts, and then we're further prepared for other parts of the build in the future. So I recommend using a sanding block, something with a nice smooth edge that's nice and level, so that it can help us keep things flat. I also recommend you take your model out of the way so you're not getting it covered in dust. So when I sand doing a job like this, rather than going in one direction with the grain or going in one direction against the grain, I like to go in a circular motion, and that reduces everything down. If you think about how you usually would sand, say, a plastic model kit, you'll go in one direction first, then you go in another direction. By going circular, we're doing that all at once, and we can do that because we've got a wide, flat area. So there we go, and I can feel how smooth that is now compared to this area here that's not been sanded. So that's all it takes. Now, there is some darkness in this wood naturally because it's a plywood. There's a sort of a dark streak in it. So don't try and sand all of that out. It's not going to happen because it's running through the wood grain. But you can see how much cleaner that looks compared to this where we've not sanded it. Okay, and it's also important that you do both sides. Okay, I'm going to finish doing that and then I'll get back to you shortly. Now at the bottom of the plan there is numbers listed for all of these wooden parts, and it might be easier at this stage, rather than having to keep cross-referencing the plans, to just put a number next to each part so you know what it is and it's easy to identify and quick to select your parts for removal. So that's what I'm just going to do now. I'm just putting numbers against them all, and then as we get them referenced we can take them out. So with our parts numbered up, we can now remove them. I recommend getting some form of container with a lid on, where you can put the parts in so you don't lose them. They are small parts and they're very thin, and you'd be amazed how easy it is to lose them. Ask me how I know. So we're just going to use our number 11 blade here just to cut through the tabs as we have done before. And the first part that we need is part 10. So I can feel I've cut through that tab. I can feel I've cut through that tab, and so on. So that's those two parts out. And we want part 12. Parts 8 and parts 9. So that's these here. Okay, that is our wooden parts removed. Okay, so that's all our wooden parts removed. We'll come back to the acetate in a minute, because what we need to do now is sand all the edges of this and get rid of the laser burn and get rid of the nubs. So I'm going to use an emery board for this job because it's nice and flat, and you can cut it down, as you can see here, and reduce the size so you can get into tight spaces. It's also thin enough to get into some of the little awkward shapes. Once you see it's changed colour, you know you're done, so don't overdo it and be careful not to change the shape. Take your time. If you rush it, you're much more likely to have an accident or misshape it, or even break the parts. The parts are fragile because the plywood, they definitely can break. And although the laminations are there to add strength, it's not as strength as if it was a whole wood part, solid wood part. There we go. So we need to do this on all the parts, so you don't need to watch me do it, you get the idea. I'm going to go away and do that now, and then I'll come back to you when it's done. I always recommend test fitting parts before assembly. That checks that you've understood correctly how to assemble them, but it also means that you can see if there's any issues with the fit that need to be sorted before we start getting the glue out. So from looking at the instructions, and we'll perhaps put the instructions into view, we can see that we have this back section here, which I think must be slotting into there, like so. Like that. And then we have this piece, which I believe must be slotting into there. I have to say, the instructions could be a little clearer because that could be going there or it could be going there. So we might have to look ahead in the instructions to double check that we are getting this right. The fit is very loose, so we are going to have problems with this. Yeah, but there's not going to be a problem with the fit because it is that loose. The problem that you have is that the parts overhang quite considerably. So when that's put into place, you can see it overhangs. So we can't lay it flat and jig it square. So we have to jig it square that way, like that. So we'll have a talk about how we do that in a moment. What I want to do first is just check forward in the instructions. Yeah, and then you can see that's our parts there assembled. So with that in mind, let's get this glued together. Okay, so we need to start building this up, and what we're going to do is we're going to get one of our side pieces. It's always worth having a look when you're building with wooden parts whether there's a good side and a not so good side. Sometimes you'll get a small knot or imperfection and you might not want that on show. So it's worth checking your sides and deciding which are the best sides for show. And I think I've decided what I'm going to do, and then we're going to get this part out here, which is our structure, and make sure we've got that in the right place, which is there. Now then, a little tip from me, great way of getting a perfect corner is Lego bricks. They're perfectly square, and you can sandwich parts together, and you can even build the bricks together and make more complex structures if you need to. So Lego bricks, really handy for jigging things up. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to use the Lego bricks to jig this up. So let's just check position. Yeah, that will work. That will work nicely. Yeah, okay, so let's get those out of the way for a minute. So we're using a little bit of wood glue. I'm using a piece of wire as an applicator for the glue so that I can apply small amounts of the glue. And we're just going to put it up this long facing edge first. And you can see that's allowing me to put a really small amount of glue on and then we're going to take it down into the recess there. And that's the only surface we're going to put glue on. Then we're going to align our part and try and keep it as straight as possible as we put it in. Okay. And press it up against, and then I'm going to put my bricks in to form a jig. And then what we do is we push the bricks together that way, and then I'm going to put another brick in here and squeeze them together. So I know I've got an absolutely perfect square bulkhead there. So we'll give that a moment or two to dry, and then we can remove the bricks and put the next side piece in. And then when we put the centre bit in, that'll give it some more rigidity, and we know we've got all our spacings correct. Unfortunately, my camera decided to stop working and I didn't notice. I use an iPad for filming and it decided to restart itself. So we've lost some of what I've done, apologies, but we still haven't finished this, so you'll get the idea. So I'm using a wire applicator to just apply small amounts of wood glue into our slots. And that's going to allow us to put the parts in place and tack them in. Now, this is actually a very tricky, more tricky than it should be. The parts are very loose, which really doesn't help. But making sure you've got the parts straight and touching all the bulkheads. So if you're not careful, these parts can kick out and they're not in full contact with that. So you need everything in full contact with that and that and that to make sure it's nice and straight. And I have used Lego bricks to form a jig. So they're a great way of getting 100% perfect 90-degree angles on your parts, as I'm about to show you. So we're going to put that in from both sides, like so, and we can squeeze them together and push them in, and that will make sure that we've got 100% perfect angles. There we go. That's all nice and straight. But you can see that's kicking that out there. So we need to pull that in. We'll sort that in a minute. It is a very tricky part. It surprised me how tricky this is to get right. So just make sure everything is nice and square. The wood glue dries fairly quickly. Don't worry about having too much glue on. You can wipe it off with a damp cloth easy enough. I think we have a little bit of warp in the parts, which is what's causing us a little bit of a problem with the parts kicking out a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clamp it together to keep it straight. There we go. Yeah, I think the part must be slightly warped. Because if I get it straight at the top, it kicks out at the bottom. If I get it straight at the bottom, it kicks out at the top. So what we can do is we can use a clamp here to push this into place. There you go. As the clamp's stronger than the wood. We'll do the same here as well. Okay, and then now we've got this all nicely jigged and straight. What we're going to do, which we would have done anyway, is to just go in and put some glue on the inside joints where it's not going to be seen. Just reinforce those joints, and that'll just help hold everything into place. Now, if you've got, we'll talk about warping in a minute, and I'll show you how you resolve it. I hadn't spotted that we had any, but clearly there was a little bit. There we go. So that is our part drying off. So I'll come back to you when that is all dried and in place. So with our assembly now dried and happy that this is all sitting nicely and sat down where it wants to be and correct, what we can do now is we can paint it. So like I said, I'm going to use this walnut paint. I can thin this with a bit of water. That's one of the advantages of using an acrylic. Now, a little tip, if you're setting out in the hobby for the first time and you've maybe not got a lot of tools, and the blister pack for tablets can make a very good improvised palette. And it's always worth decanting your paint, so don't be tempted to dip your brush into the paint pot and paint it on and dip back in, because you're then potentially adding foreign bodies into your paint, and that can even make the paint go off if you're not careful. So we're just going to decant some of that into our palette. I generally put a little bit too much in, and if you think it's a little bit thick, and unfortunately there is no science or recipe for this, it's just experience, then get it thinned down to the consistency that you want. Now, obviously, we're painting on wood, and wood's going to absorb whatever we chuck at it. Now, this is quite a small part, and it's going to be difficult to hold it the more of it we cover in paint. So find an area where you can hold it, and a good way of holding something like this is a pair of self-locking tweezers, and these are long-nosed ones, so I've got plenty of space to hold these and still see what I'm doing. And this is an internal bulkhead here,
and we're not going to see the inside surface. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just hold it like that, and there you go. You can see I can get to all angles of this, and nice and easy to paint. So we're going to paint all the surfaces. Now there is more structure being added onto this, but what this is going to do is going to show me any little imperfections where we might have some glue or something that maybe you couldn't see before, and then we can always sand it down and then give it another coat of paint. So let's get this down. You see it goes down really nice and quickly. I'm going to do these top surfaces because I don't know at this stage whether they're visible or not. You might find that you need to do 2 coats, and if you do, that's perfectly fine. It's not like painting plastic where whatever you're putting on the plastic stays on the surface of the plastic. This is going to sink in, and so you're not losing the shape or any definition by painting it. But we do want to make sure that we've painted our ends, because that's going to be an issue. And then paint inside your opening where the windows are, but make sure you've got no drips or collection of paint that's going to stop your acetate going in when we install that. If you've got a surface that you know is going to have glue on it, like this back surface, try and avoid painting it, because it's just going to help with the bonding process. But painting this is not going to get in the way of the glue, of the adhesive later on. There we go. So you can see where we first started painting here, although it feels damp to the touch, it's sunk in. So I can put a second coat on that pretty much now, and you can see the difference in the depth of colour. If I do that half there, you can see. So the more layers you put on, the darker the colour is going to get, and that's worth bearing in mind. So I've got a little bit of sanding to do there. We call that remedial work. That's basically going back round and doing it again. It's worth, when you think you've done, it's worth going around and checking all the angles, because you'll be surprised how many times I think I've done the job and then I've missed a whole panel, like I had missed that back panel there. Okay, nearly done. Right, I'm happy with that. We're going to let it dry. I'm going to tidy that up. So I'm just going to sand that flush, because there's a little lump of what is probably glue. Oh no, it's actually paint. It's a lump in the paint. There you go. I've taken that off. We can tidy that up straight away. Now, more experienced modelers, you may want to fill the gaps and sand it and get it perfectly square. I'm not doing that. I'm showing you how to build this from a sort of a beginner's point of view. So for me, that is done. We can let that dry. I'm just going around making sure I've got no collections of paint. If I have, I'm just spreading them out with my brush so that things dry nice and easy. And nice and evenly, I should say. There you go. So that is done. We can put that to one side and help that to just let that dry. And then we can look at installing the acetate. Right, we need to cut our acetate. So we have a scale 1:1 template here, and initially what we want to do is just cut out a bit of acetate that covers off the job. We don't need to worry too much about how straight our lines are, because these are all going to be glued internally. What's important is we don't cut them too small that they don't cover the area that needs glazing, and at the same time we want to make sure they're not too big and they don't fit. So what we're going to do, you can see I've got the acetate covering our template here, and what I'm basically going to do is hold that in place by taping down one half of the acetate. There you go, this can't or shouldn't move now, and then using a straight edge we're going to score along the lines. So we've got the acetate over the template, score the lines. We don't need to cut it out at this point, we just need to mark it out. So I'm just passing over it with the knife 2 or 3 times. I've actually cut that one off this time. I was hoping not to do that. That's made the job a little harder. Right, put that to one side for a minute and not taking the acetate off it. I'll have to tape it down like so. So you don't want to cut it off ideally, because it's going to cause you a problem. It just gets harder to hold it in place. Right, this last one, there we go. So now we can remove that and we can use the scored lines as a template for cutting it out. So you can either carry on scoring it and finish the job off, or the material is thin enough that you can actually just put your knife in, make sure it's sat in the groove that you've scored, and just press it down and cut through it. Right, it's an easy little bit to lose, so I'm going to put it on a bit of tape. It's stuck to my tape, and stick the tape to my desk, and I know where to find it, and I'm not going to accidentally knock it and send it flying and lose it. So I'll do the other one and then I'll come back to you when we're ready to glue it in. Right, we are ready to install our acetate windows. They are stuck down to my desk under this masking tape. And what we're going to do is we're using some wood glue, and we're just going to take a small amount on a wire, and we're going to put a tiny amount of glue at the bottom and the side of the frame. It's a little bit difficult to get in all the way around, but just going to put it around the area we can, like that. And this glue is going to dry clear, so that'll be not an issue if you manage to get some glue oozing out. You can go in with a cocktail stick and scrape it out if you need to. I'm hoping we won't have to. So using a pair of tweezers, I'm just going to go in and place it on top and press it down like that. Okay, and just check that you've not got any of your acetate overhanging that's going to get in the way of the fit of the following parts. So I have a small amount of glue that's oozed out, but I know that's going to dry clear and I won't be able to see it, so I'm going to leave it like that. So let's just get the other one done. Okay, so just drop it into place. There we go. And we'll leave that to dry, and that completes figure 8. So that completes this video. It completes figure 8, and we have constructed at least the start of the deck house, and it's looking mighty fine, I think. So that's that done, and we can put this to one side now until we're ready to start the next step. So in the next video we'll be tackling figure 9, which is where we continue to build the deck house. We have some additional structures to put on. It'll be similar to what we're doing here, but we'll go through it just in case there's any particular points of interest. Like I say, I'm aiming this very much at beginners. I'm trying to do it in a style that's easy to follow. So we'll do figure 9 in its own separate video, so that if you're building along, you know each individual video is for each step in the instructions. So thanks for joining me today. I really look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, you enjoy your modelling, and I'll see you very soon. Bye for now.
Hi, and thanks for watching. You can support the channel by hitting the like button, and if you haven't subscribed, please consider the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you don't miss any content that I put out. Model Kit Stuff is a self-funded channel, and I don't do membership or Patreon or buy me a coffee. So if you'd like to further donate to the channel and ensure the cameras keep rolling and the content keeps coming, then you can consider making a donation through my PayPal. You'll find a link to that in the text below. You enjoy your modelling, and I'll see you soon.